Hi everyone, we are back with Kyle Harper. Our battery died. Unfortunately, we cannot control that. So we have two more questions that we're going to wrap up after that. If you want to, you should go see the amazing interview that we have done on the Facebook Live link previously. We will put that in the comments here. And then we want to honor the two questions that were posted in the last segment quickly. So, all right, we have Mercedes Pulse, and she says, what, if any, are some common misconceptions about Romans? Besides that they were clean.
That they were clean.
I thought that they
I would
were
say,
clean.
yeah, that would be number one. They were not very clean. I think two is probably, we think of the Romans as the people of the city of Rome, which is true for a certain period of history. But to me, one of the really amazing things about the empire is that the Romans become this much bigger people. There's this much bigger idea of Rome that isn't just limited either to the civic sense of the people who live in that city, or to the ethnic sense of the people who are descended from the people who lived in that city, but comes to include people on this huge amount of territory. And so there are Romans, like people who think of themselves as Romans, in Egypt, in Morocco, in Syria, in Britain, and that's really extraordinary that their empire doesn't just sort of conquer people. It does that, but over time it transforms these societies in the empire so that to be Roman is something that people across this huge part of the earth, 3 continents, and people in Africa, people in Asia, people in Europe, come all to think of themselves as, in some sense, Romans.
Why do you think that people embraced or accepted that idea?
It's a great question that gets really to the core of what the Roman Empire was. I mean, it was, at one level, it was like other empires in that it was very brutal and extractive and violent, and it conquered territory. But at the same time had this kind of openness, and the Romans had ways of letting people become Roman citizens, and they ruled with law. I mean, the Romans were very proud of their law, and it's rightly famous. I mean, Roman law is probably the most influential legal system in history, and the ideals embedded in that imperial system and in Roman law, and the promises that the Roman Empire makes, at some level they have to honor those, and it allows people to have their own say, to become part of the empire. And so the empire gradually becomes sort of the possession of this huge part of the earth and this huge diversity of peoples.
Very cool. All right, our last question, and I've already said that today, but our last question is...
For real.
Yeah, for real. Our for real last question is, does the Roman culture hold the key with its grim and moribund manifestations like love for bloodshed, political intrigues, and a darker slum world which was a byproduct of its population and openness?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I understood the question right, I think it is getting at something that is really different about the Romans and really difficult for us. And, it challenges us. When you study history, I think, on the one hand, you should try and be sympathetic to the diversity of peoples and cultures, and they lived under very different and very difficult circumstances. And so we shouldn't, at some level, shouldn't be overly judgmental because they had a different way of life, and we should try and understand it and even sympathize with it up to a point. But at the same time, we shouldn't completely let go of the ability to say that in some ways the culture, even of a civilization that we might in some ways admire, had its flaws. And the Roman culture is absolutely obsessed with violence to a degree that's very different even from our world, where we have, to be sure, a large amount of violence. But I think it's difficult for us to really grasp a culture that makes the gladiatorial spectacles, where there's so much blood and so much violence and even death, into this kind of great cultural spectacle. And so, we can both admire the things that Rome accomplished, but also question the flaws of this civilization. I think that's fair.
Very, very cool. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to your
Thanks
book.
for having me.
It's been so fascinating and
Thank you.
interesting. If people want to keep up with you, where can they find you? On Twitter?
I do. I'm on Twitter.
Your tweeter?
My handle is Oklahoma Harper.
Nice.
All one word, pretty easy to find. And then I blog at kyleharper.net. I'm not a very good blogger. Can't promise that I blog all the time, but definitely on Twitter. And you can find the book easily online. Princeton University Press has a nice page, and then it's available most every major bookstore.
Awesome. All right. Do you have any parting words of wisdom?
No, I appreciate the chance to be on. I think it's fun to be able to talk about history, maybe something a little bit different for your audience. I hope they enjoyed it. And if you have a history buff in your life, they might enjoy a little bit of a different take on one of the really interesting and important chapters of human history.
And a science buff as well.
And it's for science buffs. Yeah, it can double purpose.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you
Thank
guys. Got it?